Husband thought I was clueless, stashed away $200,000, but his hidden camera betrayed him. Taylor's completely clueless. My husband Carl laughed, his voice echoing from the bathroom where he thought the running shower would mask his conversation. She actually believes I'm working late on the Johnson account. Meanwhile, I've been moving money into that offshore account for months. I froze at the bedroom doorway, laundry basket balanced against my hip. As Carl's voice continued, he was on speakerphone, presumably talking to his brother Ryan while shaving a multitasking habit I once found endearing. "How much have you stashed away?" Ryan asked, his voice tinny through the phone speaker. "Almost 200,000, Carl replied, pride evident in his tone. "And the beauty of it is that she's so busy with her precious marketing career that she barely glances at our joint accounts. All those late nights she pulls at the office make this too easy." My blood turned to ice. Those late nights were managing national campaigns for clients that had tripled my agency's revenue. The promotion I'd earned last year had pushed our household income into a tax bracket that apparently funded whatever scheme my husband was cooking up. "And she still doesn't suspect anything," Ryan sounded impressed. "Please," Carl scoffed. "Taylor thinks in straight lines, point A to point B. She's smart with her marketing spreadsheets but completely oblivious to anything beneath the surface. I've been laying the groundwork for months, making little comments to friends about how controlling she's become, how I never have access to our money, how I'm worried about her temper." I clutched the door frame, my fingernails digging into the wood. "The lawyer says it's all about establishing patterns," Carl continued. "By the time I file for divorce, everyone will already believe she's been financially and emotionally abusing me for years. Between that and the evidence I've manufactured, she'll be destroyed in court. I'll walk away with everything, including that ridiculous bonus she's so proud of." "Genius," Ryan chuckled. "When do you pull the trigger?" "A few more weeks. I need to finalize some transfers and document a few more incidents of her supposed abuse. I've got those texts you sent me pretending to be her. Those will help establish her threatening behavior. I just need to plant them on her phone." The old SIM card switch classic. Exactly, she'll never see it coming. I backed away silently, heart hammering in my chest, and slipped downstairs to the kitchen, setting down the laundry basket. I gripped the counter to steady myself. My husband of 6 years was systematically setting me up, manufacturing evidence, and planning to destroy my life in divorce court, all while I'd been bringing him coffee in bed on Sundays and organizing his surprise 35th birthday party for next month. My name is Taylor Grayson. I'm 33 years old, a senior marketing manager at Reed & Associates, and apparently married to a sociopath. This is the story of how I discovered my husband's elaborate plot to frame me for abuse, steal my money, and destroy my reputation, and how I let him dig his own grave, one shovelful of evidence at a time. I've always prided myself on being logical, strategic, the person who assesses situations and finds the optimal solution. But in that moment, staring at my kitchen backsplash while my husband plotted my destruction upstairs, logic abandoned me. My first instinct was to confront him, to storm upstairs, kick in the bathroom door, and demand explanations. But a quieter, colder voice in my head stopped me. The voice that had helped me outmaneuver competitors, anticipate market shifts, and climb the corporate ladder despite constant underestimation. "Wait," it whispered. "Watch, learn." So instead of confrontation, I did something completely out of character. I picked up the laundry basket, walked back upstairs, and began noisily sorting clothes just outside the bathroom. "Gotta go," I heard Carl mutter urgently. "She's back." When he emerged minutes later, freshly shaven and smelling of that expensive cologne I'd given him for Christmas, he smiled that crooked smile I once found charming. "Hey babe, heading out? Breakfast meeting with the Henderson client." I nodded, folded his favorite blue shirt with deliberate care, and smiled back. "Good luck. Want me to wait up tonight? We could open that Cabernet we've been saving." Something flashed behind his eyes, annoyance, contempt before his mask slipped back into place. "Don't bother, it'll be another late one. Henderson is notoriously picky." "Henderson," I repeated, knowing full well there was no Henderson client. I'd reviewed Carl's client portfolio just last week when helping him format a presentation. "Well, knock 'em dead," He kissed my forehead a perfunctory peck before grabbing his keys and heading out. I waited until I heard his BMW pull out of the driveway before I allowed myself to fall apart. But only briefly. 10 minutes of shocked sobbing, exactly timed on my Apple Watch. Then I washed my face, made a cup of coffee, and sat down at our kitchen island to strategize. Carl thought I was predictable, linear, oblivious. He'd forgotten who he was dealing with, the woman who'd orchestrated a viral marketing campaign that increased client engagement by 347% in 2 weeks. Who'd reverse-engineered a competitor's strategy so effectively they'd tried to hire me. Who'd grown up with 4 manipulative older brothers and learned to anticipate their pranks before they could execute them. If Carl wanted to play chess, he'd find I was already several moves ahead. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I located Carl's laptop carelessly left charging in his home office. The password my birthday plus his initials. How romantic granted me access to his kingdom of deception. His browser history revealed hours spent on offshore banking sites, divorce attorney research, and most chillingly, articles about fabricating evidence of abuse, manipulating digital communications, and state laws regarding division of assets. His Google Drive contained folders labeled TG evidence with meticulously dated incidents of my supposed controlling behavior, financial manipulation, and emotional volatility, all completely fabricated. There were edited screenshots of conversations we'd never had, detailed notes on times I'd been unreasonably angry, complete with fictional quotes, and a journal documenting my increasingly erratic behavior. On a Word document titled Divorce Strategy, I found his complete playbook allegations he planned to make, witnesses he'd already primed, including some of our mutual friends, and a timeline for when he would reluctantly file for divorce after my behavior became unbearable. The final gut punch was a folder containing photos of Carl with a woman I didn't recognize, intimate photos taken in hotel rooms I'd never seen, spanning back nearly a year. Eliza, according to file names, his administrative assistant, whom he'd introduced to me at last year's holiday party while keeping his hand on the small of my back. By noon, I had a complete picture of Carl's plan, and it was breathtaking in its thoroughness. He hadn't just been planning a divorce, he'd been constructing an alternate reality where I was the villain and he was the victim, where my accomplishments were weapons I'd used against him, and his deception was justified self-preservation. The most immediate threat was financial. A quick check confirmed my suspicions. Large sums had indeed been siphoned from our joint accounts through a series of transfers disguised as investments. My personal accounts appeared untouched, likely because he couldn't access them without my knowledge, but he'd systematically drained our shared resources. I made 3 calls that afternoon. First, to my bank, immediately securing my personal accounts and documenting the unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts. Second, to Soledad Zhang, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. And third, to my friend Marcus at Digital Security Solutions. I need eyes and ears everywhere, I told Marcus after explaining the situation, but they need to be completely undetectable. How legal are we talking? Marcus asked. Because that's the kind of friend he is. Completely legal, I clarified. Everything needs to be admissible in court. By that evening, when Carl texted that he was still stuck with the Henderson client, I had already set my counter strategy in motion. Tiny cameras had been expertly installed throughout our home, documenting every room except bathrooms, maintaining that legal line. Marcus had recovered deleted messages from Carl's cloud accounts, revealing months of correspondence with Ryan about the divorce plot. And Soledad had cleared her schedule for a 7 a.m. meeting. Get some sleep, Soledad advised when I called to confirm our appointment. You're going to need your wits about you. I didn't sleep. Instead, I studied my enemy, the man sleeping next to me, snoring softly after returning home at midnight smelling of unfamiliar perfume. The man who believed me to be so oblivious that he hadn't even bothered to shower before sliding into bed beside me. I watched him in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains. This stranger I'd married, and felt an odd sense of calm settle over me. I'd faced tough opponents before, but never one so underestimating of my capabilities. Carl had made the critical error of confusing my trust for stupidity, my dedication for blindness. And in that mistake lay the seeds of my victory. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception not by Carl, but by me. I became the perfect, oblivious wife. I worked my usual hours, asked no probing questions, and maintained our normal routines. Meanwhile, I watched through hidden cameras as Carl's plot unfolded in my absence. He would wait until I left for work, then make calls to Ryan or his attorney, the unscrupulous Philip Gavin of Gavin and Moore, according to my research, discussing strategy and fabricating new evidence against me. I staged another argument last night, Carl told Ryan during one particularly illuminating conversation in our kitchen. Made sure the neighbors could hear enough to think she was screaming at me, but not clearly enough to make out the words. Mrs. Peterson from next door already texted to ask if everything was okay. That's another witness in the bank. I reviewed the footage from the previous night. The argument had consisted of Carl turning up the TV volume during a movie, then muting it while shouting responses to no one. I had been working late with my boss and 3 colleagues who could verify my whereabouts. Another day. I watched as Carl rehearsed looking fearful and diminished, practicing his testimony face in our bedroom mirror. "She controls all our money," he said in a trembling voice that would have impressed any acting coach. "I have to ask permission for every purchase. Some days I'm afraid of what she might do if I stand up to her." The performance was followed by Carl taking selfies of himself looking distressed, then editing them to appear as if taken on different days by changing shirts between shots. The attention to detail would have been impressive if it weren't so disturbing. Perhaps most useful was catching him coaching Eliza on her role in the deception. "You just need to testify that you noticed bruises on my wrist once, and that I seemed jumpy whenever my phone rang," he instructed her during a call from our living room. "We don't need to prove Taylor actually hit me, just suggest the possibility enough to create reasonable doubt about her character." "What if they ask me directly if we're involved?" Eliza asked, her voice uncertain. "Deny it," Carl said firmly. "We keep our relationship out of this entirely. This is strictly about establishing Taylor as unstable and financially abusive. Once the divorce is settled, we can be more open." Each night, I downloaded the day's footage to secure servers, organized and cataloged the evidence, and updated Soledad. Each morning, I kissed Carl goodbye with a smile that revealed nothing of what I knew. The waiting was excruciating, but necessary. Soledad had been clear. Let him execute his plan fully. The more elaborate his deception, the more devastating his fall. The breaking point came sooner than expected. 3 weeks into my surveillance, I returned home to find Carl sitting at the kitchen island, head in his hands, the picture of despair. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my work bag. "I can't do this anymore, Taylor," he said, voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "The walking on eggshells, the financial control, the constant fear of setting you off." I blinked, momentarily impressed by his commitment to the performance. If I hadn't heard him rehearsing this exact speech that morning, complete with practicing when to allow his voice to break, I might have been convinced. "What are you talking about?" I asked, deliberately keeping my voice level, knowing the cameras were recording everything. "This," he gestured wildly, "the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm crazy for even speaking up. The way you control every aspect of our lives. I haven't had access to our joint savings account in months." This was categorically false. He'd withdrawn $5,000 just last week. "Carl, that's not true. You have the same access you've always had." "See? There you go again. Gaslighting me, making me question my own reality." He stood abruptly, knocking over a bar stool for dramatic effect. "I've been documenting everything. Taylor, the financial abuse, the emotional manipulation, the threats." "What threats?" I asked, genuinely curious which fabricated threats he'd settled on. "Like you don't know," he scoffed, pulling out his phone and showing me a screen of texts allegedly from me. "If you ever leave me, I'll destroy you. No one will hire you when I'm done. You'll have nothing." The texts were well-crafted forgeries. but just sloppy enough to be disprovable, sent on days when my phone was being repaired or when I was in documented meetings without access to messaging. Those aren't real, Carl. More gaslighting, he shouted, now working himself into a true theatrical frenzy. This is exactly why I've already filed for divorce. My attorney will be serving you papers tomorrow. There it was, the trigger I'd been waiting for. I nodded slowly, maintaining my composure. I see. My calm reaction clearly wasn't what he'd expected. He seemed thrown off balance, having anticipated tears or rage that would further support his narrative. That's all you have to say, he demanded. What would you like me to say, Carl? You've clearly made your decision. I picked up my bag and headed upstairs, calling over my shoulder, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. As I closed the guest room door, I heard him frantically dialing someone, probably Ryan or his attorney, confused by my failure to react according to his script. I smiled for the first time in weeks as I texted Soledad. He pulled the trigger. Papers coming tomorrow. Her response was immediate. Perfect, we're ready. Carl's divorce filing was a masterpiece of fiction. According to the documents delivered by a smirking process server, I had subjected Carl to systematic financial abuse, emotional terrorism, and created a home environment of fear and intimidation. He sought full control of our assets, claiming his contributions had been exploited and mismanaged by me, and that he deserved compensatory damages for the psychological trauma inflicted during our marriage. The filing included affidavits from witnesses, including our neighbor Mrs. Peterson, two of Carl's colleagues, and Ryan, all testifying to Carl's diminished emotional state and concerning comments I had supposedly made about controlling our finances. There were printed copies of the fabricated threatening texts, carefully edited bank statements suggesting I had restricted Carl's access to funds, and even therapist notes from a therapist Carl had never actually seen documenting his abuse-related anxiety. The coup de grace was a request for a temporary restraining order, claiming I had made threats when confronted about the divorce, completely inverting our actual calm conversation from the night before. I handed everything to Soledad, who reviewed the documents with a practiced eye. This is actually impressive in its audacity, she remarked. He's gone all in on a completely fictional narrative. He always did have a vivid imagination, I replied, though I never appreciated it being applied this way. The good news, she continued, is that elaborate lies are much easier to disprove than simple ones. He's created an entire alternative universe with dozens of pressure points we can exploit. Over the next week, Carl moved out, making a performative show of having a friend come with him for protection as he gathered his things. Despite my being at work during his entire moving process as documented by our home security system, meanwhile, Soledad's team methodically dismantled his case. The fabricated text messages were proven impossible by subpoenaed phone records. The bank statements were shown to be altered when compared with official records. The therapist whose notes were submitted was revealed to have never treated Carl at all, the letterhead stolen and repurposed with forged signatures. Most devastatingly, we had footage of Carl coaching witnesses, manufacturing evidence, and explicitly describing his plan to frame me. We have two options, Soledad explained during our pre-hearing strategy session. We can submit all evidence to the court beforehand and watch his case collapse immediately. Or we can let him perjure himself and then reveal everything during the hearing for maximum impact. Which would be more satisfying? I asked, surprising myself with the vindictive edge in my voice. Soledad smiled, the terrifying smile that had earned her the nickname Shark in Stilettos among her peers. The second option is certainly more dramatic, but it also carries greater risk of a sympathetic judge giving him an opportunity to backpedal. What would you do? I asked. I'd destroy him before he ever set foot in the courtroom, she said without hesitation. But I'm not the one he tried to frame for abuse. I thought about it for a long moment, weighing options. Let's take the safer route. Submit everything beforehand. But I want to be there when he realizes it's all over. 2 days before our scheduled hearing, Soledad's team submitted our response to Carl's petition, including all evidence of his deception, within hours. The judge had reviewed the materials and called an emergency conference with both attorneys. I wasn't present for this meeting, But Soledad's recounting made it clear the judge was incandescent with rage, according to her. Judge Watkins, a stern woman with 20 years on the family court bench, had torn into Philip Gavin, demanding to know if he was aware his client had fabricated evidence and committed perjury in signed affidavits. By that evening, Carl's petition was not just denied but dismissed with prejudice, with a referral to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to fraud upon the court. The temporary restraining order was vacated, and the judge had scheduled a sanctions hearing to determine financial penalties for the frivolous and fraudulent filing. Most satisfyingly, Judge Watkins had ordered Carl and his attorney to appear in person the next morning with me present for a formal dismissal and reprimand. The courtroom was nearly empty when Carl arrived the next morning, looking considerably less polished than usual. His normally perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled, as if he'd slept in his car, which, according to my sources, he had, after Eliza kicked him out upon learning the full extent of his deception. His confident stride faltered when he spotted me sitting calmly beside Soledad, both of us immaculate in conservative business attire, twin expressions of professional detachment on our faces. "What's going on?" I heard him hiss at Gavin. "Why is she here? You said this was just a procedural issue." Gavin, sweating visibly through his bargain suit, mumbled something inaudible just as Judge Watkins entered the courtroom. What followed was the most satisfying 30 minutes of my life. Judge Watkins, a woman who could wither a cactus with her glare, systematically dismantled Carl's case, his character, and any remaining dignity he might have possessed. "In 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to abuse the legal system," she began, fixing Carl with a stare that had him physically shrinking in his chair. "Mr. Grayson, you came to this court with fabricated evidence, perjured testimony, and malicious intent to defraud both your spouse and this court." Carl attempted to interrupt a critical error. "Silence," Judge Watkins snapped. "You will speak when instructed to, not before." She proceeded to detail every aspect of Carl's deception, referencing specific camera footage, dates, and statements with each revelation. Carl seemed to physically diminish, the blood draining from his face as he realized the comprehensive nature of the evidence against him. "Your petition is not merely denied, Mr. Grayson, it is dismissed with prejudice, meaning you cannot refile these or similar claims. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay all legal expenses incurred by Mrs. Grayson in defending herself against these fraudulent allegations." She turned to me, her expression softening fractionally. "Mrs. Grayson, the court acknowledges the distress these false allegations must have caused. You have conducted yourself with remarkable restraint and integrity throughout these proceedings. Do you wish to file a counter-petition at this time?" I glanced at Carl, the man I had once loved, now reduced to a pale, trembling shadow of himself, and felt nothing but pity. "No, Your Honor," I replied. "I believe justice has been served today. I would like to proceed with a simple no-fault divorce, with division of assets according to our prenuptial agreement." The judge nodded approvingly. "Very well, that proceeding will be scheduled separately." She turned back to Carl, her expression hardening again. "Mr. Grayson, you are fortunate your wife has chosen not to pursue additional charges. The court is not so forgiving. You are hereby referred to the district attorney's office for investigation of perjury, fraud upon the court, and evidence tampering. You are also referred to the State Bar Ethics Committee for your role in coaching witnesses to provide false testimony." Carl's attorney began protesting that he had no knowledge of his client's deception, but Judge Watkins cut him off. "Mr. Gavin, if you were genuinely unaware, that speaks to catastrophic negligence in vetting your client's claims. If you were aware, that makes you complicit in fraud. Neither reflects well on your professional judgment. You will have an opportunity to make these arguments to the Ethics Committee." And with that, it was over. Carl, ashen-faced and silent, was escorted from the courtroom by his visibly furious attorney. I remained seated beside Soledad, allowing myself a single deep breath of relief. "Congratulations," Soledad whispered. "That was a complete victory." "Not quite," I replied. "There's one more thing." As we exited the courthouse, we found Carl standing alone on the steps, staring blankly into the distance. His attorney was nowhere to be seen, having apparently abandoned his drowning client. I approached him calmly, Soledad a protective shadow behind me. "Taylor," he began, his voice uncharacteristically small. "I can explain." "Save it," I interrupted. "I just want to know one thing. Was any of it real us ever?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "In the beginning, before everything." I nodded, accepting this meager truth. "Goodbye, Carl. I've instructed Soledad to handle all further communication. Please, don't contact me again." As I turned to leave, he called after me, desperation evident in his voice. "How did you know? When did you figure it out?" I paused, considering the question. Then I looked back over my shoulder, meeting his eyes one final time. "From the moment you assumed I wouldn't." The aftermath unfolded with a certain poetic justice. Carl's carefully constructed life collapsed like a house of cards. His law firm placed him on unpaid leave pending the ethics investigation. Eliza, realizing she'd hitched her wagon to a falling star, leaked incriminating texts to mutual acquaintances in an attempt to distance herself from the scandal. The offshore accounts were frozen by court order and eventually returned to me as part of the settlement. Ryan faced his own reckoning. The evidence of his participation in Carl's scheme cost him his partnership at his accounting firm. His wife filed for divorce after discovering his role in fabricating evidence against me. And he found himself subject to an IRS audit triggered by the court's referral. As for me, I emerged with my reputation, career, and finances intact and with valuable lessons about trust, manipulation, and my own resilience. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, with Carl accepting the terms of our original prenuptial agreement without contest. By then, he had moved to another state, changed jobs, and largely vanished from our social circles, though occasional updates filtered through mutual acquaintances. Last I heard, he was working entry-level sales at a struggling tech startup, living in a studio apartment, and telling anyone who would listen that his ex-wife had connections that had ruined his life. I haven't corrected the narrative. Let him believe in conspiracies and connections, rather than face the simpler truth that his downfall was entirely self-inflicted, the natural consequence of underestimating someone he should have respected. Sometimes I think about the moment I overheard that bathroom conversation, how differently things might have unfolded if I'd confronted him immediately. How easily I might have become the crazy, emotional wife he was trying to portray. How my outrage might have played directly into his hands. Instead, by remaining calm, strategic, and 2 steps ahead, I allowed Carl to execute his elaborate plan to perfection right up until it collapsed around him. When friends ask if I'm dating again, I laugh and say I'm taking a break from men who underestimate me. It's become something of a personal filter. I'm attracted to people who recognize my capabilities from the start, who see my strategic mind as an asset rather than a threat. My name is Taylor Grayson. I'm 34 years old, recently promoted to marketing director at Reed & Associates, and single by choice rather than deception. My ex-husband thought he could destroy me by crafting an elaborate fiction about who I am. Instead, he learned the hard way that I'm exactly who I've always been, smarter than he gave me credit for, stronger than he believed possible, and incapable of being anyone's victim. The most satisfying revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's simply allowing them to reap exactly what they've sown while you walk away to build something better.